Hey, how you going? So I've got an 80 series 96 model. It's a 9th month 96 with the 1FZ FE petrol motor. And I had a bit of an issue with it. So I've worked out what it is. But I just want to show you, so in case you've got the same issue or it happens. Long story short, jumped in it one day, went down the road, driving down the road, running fine. It was only been running for about 4 minutes, cut out, engine stopped, wouldn't fire. Turned the key, it'd turn over, whine, wouldn't fire. Jumped out, checked everything, checked all the hoses, checked fuel lines, checked to see if something had come off, trying to work out what was going on. Everything looked fine. Tried again, just turn up, whine, wouldn't fire. Thought, okay, rightio. So towed it back into the shed, left it there, had another better look at connections to make sure that leads or dizzy caps or fuel lines or whatever, something had come off. Everything looked fine, couldn't work out what was going on. Next morning, come up, thought I'll hit the key and see what happens. It fired, ran beautiful, mint. Ran for about 3 or 4 minutes and then just stopped again. Turned it over, whine, wouldn't fire. Couldn't work out what the hell was going on. Everything was connected, everything seemed fine, didn't know what was going on. Had a play with it, still couldn't get it going. Next morning, once the engine had cooled down, same thing. Hit the key, bam, run, fire, engine, it was fine. Beautiful, running, not missing, running beautifully for about 3 or 4 minutes and then just turn off. Engine just cut out again. So obviously, while it was cold and cool, it was running fine. As soon as it get hot, it'd stop. So I had to try and work out what was going on. So the first thing I thought is, it's probably fuel or electrical. So I thought I'll check the fuel, make sure the fuel pump and everything's working. Because in these particular models, the fuel pump is in the fuel tank. But there is a way of checking to make sure it's working. So one way to do that is to check your, have a look at your OBD port. So mine's an OBD1, my model, and there's an OBD2. So this one has the OBD1. Like I said, it's a 9th month 96 motor. So that's it there. It says diagnosis on the cap. You can just pop that open. And what you can actually do is jump a couple of these terminals to jump the fuel pump to make it work. In the cap, I'll just get in there. In the top of the cap, it'll actually tell you what the terminals do. So if you read it from left to right. Now, in that top left, you'll see FP and plus B. So this point here and this point here, if you get a paper clip and put it between those points, it'll connect them and it'll make the fuel pump run. So what you do basically is put the ignition on, don't start the car, put the ignition on, just have the ignition on, get a paper clip and push it down into there, and listen for the fuel pump. So I did that and it kicked in, I could hear it humming. So the fuel was working. And another thing you can do to see if the fuel is working is, here's your fuel pump regulator here. That's your fuel line in there and goes in here, and then it pumps it down the fuel rail. The line out the top is the return line back to the fuel tank. Anyway, so you could pull that off to see if it's pumping fuel. So I did all that and it was pumping fuel. So then I thought, well, obviously it must be electrical. So then I thought, well, or either that or the fuel pump after a while is cutting out. Anyway, so what I did is I grabbed an EFI, that's the electronic fuel injection. There's a fuse in here. So if you pop that off, the fuse is in here, it's your main fuse box. I replaced that, I bought a new one of them, replaced that, and tried that when I got home after work, and obviously the car had cooled down, put that in, it started, fired, ran beautiful for a couple of minutes, and then just stopped. There again, it just stopped. I thought, well, that's obviously not the issue. So then I started thinking sensors, and I did a bit of research to work out or try and find where the crank angle sensor is on these things. And there's a couple of different models of this engine. So previous models are slightly different and later models are slightly different as well. So there's a different OBD port. There's an OBD2. Mine's the OBD1. Anyway, because there's a few different models of this engine, what I found was, the only research I could find was the crank angle sensor was at the front of the sump. So underneath the sump, just behind the crank, there's a little sensor mounted up under there. Mine doesn't have it. So I thought, well, that's great. So did a little bit more research and found that we've got sensors in our distributor. So here's my old distributor. There's sensors in there. So this one here, as you can see, now that should be nice and shiny and silver. And there's one on this side as well. So there's one there. And then as your rotor spins, it lines up those sensors. Now, what I ended up doing is I bought a brand new distributor and put it in, and it solved my issue, fixed it. So she runs beautiful now. So this is obviously corroded a fair bit. I have done a lot of creek crossings over the years. I've had this car 20 years. I've done a lot of creek crossings. This is actually the original Toyota distributor, so that gives you a bit of an indication on how good they are. But you can see the corrosion in there. So obviously it's got moisture in it. They should be nice and shiny and silver. They look like they've got barnacles on them. So obviously it's got a bit of moisture in there over the years, and it's finally corroded up. So what was happening was when it was cold, it would fire up and run beautiful. But then once it warmed up and maybe the gaps opened up, something like that, the computer couldn't get the information from the sensors. So because it couldn't get that information, it just turns off. It protects the motor and just turns the motor off, and then it wouldn't fire again because the motor was warm. Once it cooled down, the sensors and everything cooled down, it'd run for a little while, but then just cut out again. So anyway, so I ended up putting a new distributor in, a whole complete new one. Fixed the problem. Beautiful, it runs sweet now, no issue at all. Also, while I was going, I did actually replace that fuel pressure regulator because mine was fairly old and I'd never done it, and I'd had the car 20 years, so it probably was okay, but just for serviceability I thought I'd whack a new one in, and also whacked in a new coil. So there's your lead there, that blue lead coming from the Dizzy to your coil, and your coil's down there. I still had the original factory Toyota coil, and it was still okay. However, for serviceability I thought, well, I'll replace it while I'm going, just to make sure that don't have any further issues. So anyway, that solved my problem. So if you're having issues with your motor running and then all of a sudden just cutting out, and then the next day when it's cold firing up again, it could be a sensor issue. And if you've got a 1FZFE, my model, that could be your problem there, the distributor. So what I would do is pop that cap off, pop the cap off, and check out to see what it looks like inside. If it's a bit messy, I would be replacing it. So she's beautiful now, runs like a dream, so back to how it should be. So, yeehaw.